Hi everyone, thank you for listening to our AP Latin project. We will be going over passage 4 Rudlieb and INT 2, and this project is done by Maya and Ali. In the FRQ sections, students will need to answer two questions each with two parts about two of the four project passages.
The first of the questions will be sourced from one of our poetry passages, and the other will be sourced from prose.
For each project passage short essay question, you will be given a Latin text that was provided for study during the school year, and you would have gone over this text in class.
This is what the FRQ will consist of. Part A should include a brief one-sentence summary of everything that happens in the text, and it should also include a clear beginning, middle, and end following the chronological order of the story.
Part B should have an interpretation question where students must cite pieces of the text to answer a question and develop their own interpretation of the Latin.
Our type of question, INT2, will require students to develop their own interpretation about either an effect or a purpose of something in a Latin text. For part A, first you need to summarize the passage in 4 to 5 complete sentences. This is what you're expected to do in that summary. Provide your summary sentence, like I said, and address the entire passage in its chronological order.
Here's the right example for our passage. This passage is about the dialogue about a chess game between Rudelieb and a king about playing a chess match. In the beginning, the king requests Rudelieb to play a game with him. In the middle, Rudelieb does not want to accept the match or defeat the king in fear that the king will get angry with him if Rudelieb beats him in the game. However, in the end, the king states that he will not become angry with Rudelieb if Rudelieb wins, and instead wishes to learn new techniques from Rudelieb. Afterwards, the king and Rudelieb play, and Rudelieb wins 3 times. As you can see, my first sentence gives a brief overview of the whole passage, and I talk about both the dialogue and the actual playing of the chess match. Then I go on to show in chronological order what is going on in the passage with transition phrases. So first I say in the beginning to clearly signal that I am talking about something that is occurring in the beginning. And then I explain what has happened during the beginning. Next, I go on to say in the middle and give a sentence of what is going on during the middle. And finally, I say in the end and give a sentence with that. And I choose to add one more sentence afterwards to add on to the ending.
This is an example of a wrong answer that somebody could submit for this question. It says, "This passage is about a chess game between a monk named Rudelieb and a king. Even though Rudelieb doesn't want to play with him, they still do play, and Rudelieb wins." This answer is wrong for a couple of reasons. First, in its summary sentence, it says it's about a chess game between the two of them, when really it's more about the dialogue surrounding their chess game, and not much is said in the entirety of the text about the game itself. Additionally, this answer doesn't explain the chronology of this story. It gives information that Rudelieb doesn't want to play with him, which is true and happens at the beginning of the story, and it also says that they do play and that Rudelieb wins, which happens at the end. This answer doesn't explain what happens in the middle of the story, nor does it give clear chronological terms that show the transition of what happens at the beginning, middle, and end.
For part B, our example prompt we came up with is identify one argument Rudelieb gives as a reason to not play against the king. Explain how the king responds to this argument. So your explanation must include at least 2 specific Latin citations from the passage. Explain how the Latin citations support your response. Include one piece of relevant contextual or stylistic information. And explain how this reference supports your response. This is the right example for passage 4 for question B. Rudelieb says that the king should not play against people who do not have a high standing. Terrible miserum concludere rege. By using the word miserum, wretched, Rudelieb shows that he does not believe himself to be a good enough man to play against someone with a high standing like the king. After Rudelieb says these things, the king responds by saying that he is strongly wishing to play against Rudelieb. Sed quam districte noscas ludas volo cum me. By emphasizing how greatly he wants to play against Rudelieb, the king is able to successfully convince Rudelieb to start playing the game immediately. Rudlieb demonstrates the Roman value of humility, when he claims he is not a good enough person to play against the king. While this action might have been marked by a fear of punishment, it still demonstrates that he is a modest person. So as you can see, my first sentence identifies a reason Rudlieb gives to not play against the king, and then I follow up by giving the Latin citation. I then go to explain how this Latin citation shows that Rudlieb does not want to play against the king. Next, I identify what the king gives as a response to this argument, and I provide the Latin citation for that as well. I then go to explain how this shows that this was a good argument that he gave, and how the king and Rudlieb were able to start playing the game afterwards. Finally, I give a broader context to this, and I give a Roman value. And then I explain how Rudlieb demonstrates this Roman value. This is what you need in a good response for part B.
Now let's take a look at a wrong example. It says, Rudlieb doesn't want to play chess with the king because he thinks the king is terrible, citing terribile rege. Then he says, the king insists that he wants to play with Rudlieb anyway. He says, ludas volo cum me. This means that even though Rudlieb doesn't want to play, the king was still able to convince Rudlieb otherwise. This is an example of a wrong answer for a couple reasons. For one, the reason that this student cited as why Rudlieb doesn't want to play with the king misinterprets the Latin in the passage. By claiming that terribile rege means that the king is terrible shows that the student misunderstood the case endings and doesn't understand the Latin. Terribile and rege both end in a short e, which means that they might look like they match as a pair, but actually terribile is a neuter singular of a third declension adjective meant to match the infinitive con ludere, while rege is an ablative of accompaniment to go with con ludere. This shows that the student does not have a deep understanding of the Latin. Additionally, their citation was only 2 words, which does not meet the required depth for this answer. Then, if we look at the second citation that the student has, it is long enough and it is interpreted correctly. But his answer that the king insists that he wants to play with Rudlieb anyway does not relate directly to what the student argued was Rudlieb's argument. Additionally, this answer does not provide any additional commentary or interpretation other than blatantly stating what happens in the text.
Thank you for listening.